Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, January the 17th, 2020. It is currently 9:16 a.m. Central Time. Now, I don't know if you can hear it. My microphone is pretty close to my window. And right now outside, well, the rain is coming down and you may pick up the sound of it as you're listening. You may hear it. I don't know if the microphone will pick it up. If you do, that's what that sound is. And it kind of really fits to what we're going to be talking about because right now outside my window, there is a storm. Rain is falling. It is cold here in West Texas. And so it's the perfect setting to talk about something very important because we're going to really be talking about how people handle the word of God. We're going to really be talking about rightly dividing the word of truth. And I want you to listen to me carefully because I bet that you have heard sermons that did what I'm going to explain. What I'm going to illustrate, I guarantee you've heard sermons that did the exact same thing. And I want you to think carefully about what you have heard. And I want you to be prepared when you hear sermons like it in the future. All right. So let's do this. Let's begin this way. And if I said 2019, I apologize. It is 2020. I yesterday in a live broadcast, I said 2019. I don't know why I'm reverting back to 2000. For some reason, I don't want to accept that it's 2020, but it is 2020. All right. So let's do this. I want you to imagine the following scenario. Imagine that you wake up on a Monday morning and within a few hours, everything starts going wrong in your day. And yes, at the beginning, it's just the normal irritants of life. You know, this situation is irritating. This situation is irritating. And they just, one thing happens after another. You find yourself getting irritated. And after a while, these irritating situations become frustrating situations. And you go from irritation to frustration. And hour after hour, as your Monday progresses, things just seem to continue to go. They continue to just move from bad to worse. And by the end of Monday, you're just sitting there going, unbelievable. This day was horrible. And all you want to do is go to sleep. So you go to sleep and you wake up Tuesday. And once again, the day just starts off the wrong way and everything continues to go wrong. And it's way past, the daily irritants of life. It's way past frustrating situations. I mean, things are really going wrong and you can't believe it. And by Thursday, it seems like everything is literally falling apart around you. It feels like you're being tossed this way and that way. It feels like you're being beaten. You're being bruised. You're being bloodied. And you want it all to stop and you don't know what's going on. And now you've moved past irritation. You've moved past frustration. You've moved past anger. You're literally discouraged, depressed. You don't know what is going on. You want it to stop. You can't, it's like you feel like you can't handle one more thing. And by the time Saturday comes around, your situations have almost reached the level of tragedy and everything has become tragic and you're almost a broken person and you have no idea what to do. You toss and turn all Saturday night, but Sunday morning, as you're laying there in bed, you decide, you know what? I'm going to go to church. Don't feel like it, but I'm going to go. And you go to church, you find your place, you take a seat. And as you're sitting there, the pastor comes to the pulpit and he speaks to everyone and he speaks to the congregation. And maybe he says something like, hey, brothers and sisters, this week, have you found yourself in the middle of a storm? Have you found yourself being tossed this way and that way by the waves? And at times you felt like you were going to sink. At times it felt like your boat was going to break apart and you were going to be swept away by the storm. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm not talking about a literal storm. I'm talking about the figurative storms of life. This week, have you found yourself in a horrible storm that you felt was going to destroy you, that it was going to drown you, that you could not take 1 second more of it, and you wanted an escape? Well, if that is you this morning, I've got good news for you, because I am going to tell you there is one who can calm the storm of your life. And as you sit there and hear that, you're thinking, wow, I'm so glad I came to church. This is directly for me. This is being spoken to me. God is using this pastor to speak directly to my circumstances because I have been in the midst of a storm. And the pastor opens his Bible and he tells you to turn to Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. And he begins to read and he begins to make some points that sound something like this. Mark 4, 35 to 41. And the same day, when the evening was come, he saith unto them, that is Jesus speaking unto the disciples. He saith unto them, let us pass over unto the other side. I want you to know, and then he says something like this. I want you to know this morning that if you're in the midst of that storm, it was Jesus who led you into that storm. Jesus, God is sovereign, and he led you into that storm. Jesus knows what is coming in this text. Yet he's the one who tells them, let's cross over. He tells them, let us pass to the other side. He knows what is coming, and he tells them to get in the boat. He tells them to go across, and Jesus knows what is coming. God knew what was coming this week in your life. God knew the storm was coming, and he led you directly into the storm. You can trust that there is a purpose for it. You can trust that God wants you there. You may not want to be there, but you can trust that there is an eternal, transcendent plan for what you are going through. And then verse 36. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship, and there were also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. There's Jesus. They're in this, they're going across the sea. The storm arises and the boat is full of water. It's about to sink. They're in a desperate situation. Please note this. Verse 36, and he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. I want you to know something, that Jesus not only leads you into the storm, he is with you in the middle of the storm. He's right there. And please note, in the text, Jesus is asleep because Jesus is calm. Jesus is in control. Jesus knows what is going on. You may not feel like that the situation is in control. You may feel like the situation is falling apart and out of control, but Jesus is right there with you. If you are a Christian, Jesus is with you in the midst of the storm. And guess what? He's calm. He's asleep. There's no panic with him because he led you into the storm. He's controlling the situation. Well, these disciples, they think they're going to die, and they wake him and say, verse 38, and they say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? Sometimes when we find ourselves in the middle of the storm, we think and we feel like God doesn't care. God doesn't care if we drown, and we cry out in a panic. But we should be calm because look who is with us in the storm. Look at what he can do. And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Jesus can calm the storm of your life. Now, Jesus goes on to rebuke them for having little faith. And sometimes when we're in the midst of the storm, we demonstrate a lack of faith. We demonstrate a lack of trust. We feel like that God has left us, but we have to, by faith, believe he is with us in the midst of the storm. And he can speak to the storm of your life and my life and say, peace, be still. And he can calm the wind. He can calm the waves, but we must trust in him. Whatever storm you're facing today, you trust in Jesus. You cry out to Jesus, and he can say, peace, be still, and he can calm your storm that you're facing. He can calm the storm that you're in the midst of. He can bring it to an end in an instant. Trust in him. Do not panic. Do not demonstrate a lack of faith. The reason he brought you into the storm is to test your faith and to strengthen your faith. So this morning, call out to the one who can calm your storm. All right. Now that's just a quick summary of how the sermon could be preached. Obviously, it could be done in many different ways, but this kind of sermon has been preached 1,000,000 times in 1,000,000 churches all across the planet. All right. It happens all the time. If you do a Google search, Jesus calms the storms of life in Jesus, you will find thousands and thousands of sermons. Who knows how many? There's been books written on this concept. There's many times children in the children's Sunday school or vacation Bible school, they'll draw they'll color a picture of Jesus calming the storm. And the teacher will say, Jesus can calm the storms of your life. This is how everyone handles the text. Now, here's my question this morning. Is that a correct handling of the text? Is this story in Mark, is it there? It's also recorded in Matthew and the other Gospels. Is this story there to teach us about Jesus and the storms of our life? Or is this story there simply to describe what Jesus did to a literal storm? What is the story actually there for? Now, first we have to determine what the story is there for. And I think we could probably argue that it's there first and foremost to show Jesus has the power over nature, making an argument for his deity. Right? I think we can take something from that. Now, do we have the license to then take this story of a literal storm, Jesus calming a literal storm, Jesus' power over nature, and then preach it and take it and basically look at the whole story from an allegorical perspective and turn it into a story about storms of life and about Jesus being in the boat with us? The boat represents our life. The storms represents the storms of life. Jesus is in the boat with us. We call out to Jesus. Jesus stands up, says, "Peace, be still," and he brings calm to the storm. And then we give everyone this hope that Jesus is in the boat with us and he will calm the storms of our life. Almost as if it's a promise. So here's what I want you to do. Now, if I was at church, I would possibly do this. I would tell everyone to grab a piece of paper and I would have them spend a few minutes writing down their best justification for applying this text to you, to me, and the storms of life. And then maybe try to write out their best argument against doing that. Do you think it's biblical to do that? Do you? Because there have been plenty of people who are Christians who have gone through the storms of life and the situation gets worse, sometimes resulting in death. And no one stands up and says, "Peace, be still." No one stops the storm. Sometimes the storms of life just stop, just like they stop for everyone. The situation just finally ends. No supernatural intervention takes place. Are we giving people a false hope? Are we giving people a false promise? Are we mishandling the text? Are we misapplying the text? Now, again, you have to try to figure out what's your best argument for applying this to the storms of life, and what's your best argument for not doing so. Now, the text itself doesn't say anything about storms of life, obviously. The text has Jesus calming a literal storm. Now, what cross references do we use to pull this out? To take this story and basically pull from the story an application that sounds so good. It does sound so good. And as a preacher, you want to preach that text. You want to, because you know that there's going to be someone sitting in the pew who's probably experiencing some kind of upheaval or storm in their life. And they're going to thank you for the sermon. And they're going to feel like that you've just given them hope. And you're going to feel like you accomplished something. And they're going to praise your sermon. And it's a win-win situation for everyone. I guarantee you, and early in my Christian life, I probably preached the text exactly that way. Now, after all of these years of constantly questioning all the sermons I've listened to, because typically as a pastor, you in many cases, you know, as Christians, I would hope Christians in general, but as pastors and those studying to be pastors, tend to listen to a lot of sermons. As you listen to a lot of sermons, sometimes the typical way a text is handled just becomes your default position. You've heard 20 sermons on a text, you get ready to preach it. It's inevitable that you're just going to take kind of the template that's been handed to you by all of these other pastors and say, well, this is the way I'm to preach the text. But is it the right way? Now, obviously, from the text, we see that Jesus leads them into the storm. Okay, I could cross-reference that with passage of God being sovereign, and then he works all things according to his good will and pleasure. Okay, if God is working all things according to his good will, we could talk about God's eternal decree, God's sovereignty. All right, then no matter what situation I'm facing, we can trust that God is in control. We could take this and bring it over to the book of Job, where God literally sets up the situation. He speaks to Satan and say, have you considered my servant Job? He sets up the situation. He creates the situation, knowing what's going to happen, knowing what Satan is going to say. He creates the situation. And we could argue that he puts Job in the midst of a horrible situation. I don't know if we can call it a storm, but we can say he definitely put him in a horrible situation. God set that up. Okay. There's an example of God's sovereignty. So we can say God is sovereign and that whatever situation we are in, God ordains it, decrees it. He's in charge. He is sovereign. Okay. We could cross-reference that and prove that. Okay. Jesus is in the boat with us. All right. We have promises that he would never leave or forsake us. I think that is true. The Holy Spirit is with us. If we're Christians, we are his children. Okay, I think we could say Jesus is with us. Now, we could call the situations we face in life the storms of life. I think that's a very common way of speaking. The Bible may not use that phrase, but I think I think we have some ability to say in life we can say this, we face very difficult situations. We can face great upheaval. We can face great emotional upheaval. And sometimes even our life can be in danger. And we've all faced different kinds of situations. Maybe are not our lives being in danger, but very emotional, difficult situations that could be tragic financially, in a lot of other different ways. And of course, some families do experience, obviously, death. I mean, at some point, everyone, someone is going to die in your family unless Christ returns. So we could call that an upheaval, horrible circumstances, and we could say Jesus is in the midst of that. Okay, I think we can draw a correlation. Now, the standing up and saying, peace be still. Now, listen, that is Jesus calming the actual storm. That would be Jesus fixing the situation. That would be Jesus bringing an end to the situation. I would argue that the Bible seems to speak of a different kind of peace. This is peace be still to the circumstances. The Bible seems to speak of a peace within the circumstances, that Jesus may not say peace be still to the storm, but if we give everything to prayer and supplication, we can experience the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, and that is an internal peace. The storm may rage. The storm may continue to take our boat and throw it from side to side, if we want to borrow from that language. Jesus may not say peace be still to the storm that we're experiencing, but he may, by prayer and supplication, we can experience a peace internally. Is that more of the biblical teaching? Is that a better application? In this historical account, Jesus calms a literal storm. But in your life, can I guarantee that Jesus is going to stand and say, peace be still to your storm? I cannot promise you that. I cannot guarantee that. I can't in any way, shape, or form. So there's some things I could draw a correlation to, and there's other things I'm not so sure that's even the biblical teaching. And if you go back to Mark, it ends in a rebuke. let me pull the text back up. Let me lean over here and grab my Bible or my iPad. I have it, have the text on my iPad. If you go, Jesus says unto him, he arose, he rebuked this wind. He told the peace be still. Everything was ceased and there was great calm. And he said unto them, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, what man is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now, if we allow the text to speak for itself, those two concluding verses seem to drive home the point. Point number one, they lacked faith in the midst of the storm, right? And I think the Bible is from Genesis to Revelation, constantly rebukes a lack of faith, condemns weak faith, tells us to trust in God, to have faith. I think we can definitely cross-reference and draw some correlation there. And the second, so that seems to be the major point of the storm. The major point of the story of this storm is rebuking their lack of faith. And we all are, and we may not face whether we can draw a correlation from the storm here and try to create a sermon about the storms of life. We can say that we can face difficult circumstances, and we are to have faith. When Israel faced difficult circumstances, when they saw that going into the promised land there were giants, they lacked faith. They did not trust God. Over and over and over, that's a theme in the Bible. All right, so I think we can definitely bring cross-references there. That the main point here is, do you have faith? Not that Jesus will calm your storm, but do you have faith? Right? I think the Bible seems to say that there's a promise of internal peace in spite of the external circumstances, and that no matter what the external circumstances are, we are to have faith. And that faith is trusting in God, and not just trusting that God will calm the storm, but just trusting God in the midst of the storm. Right? That seems to be the major emphasis here. And the second major emphasis at the end of that passage in Mark seems to be that they realize that Jesus, in fact, let me read the verse again so I don't misquote it or misapply it. I mean, we're talking about handling the text correctly here. That Jesus, the disciples said one to another, what manner of man is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? I think the next or the second major point this text is trying to bring out is for everyone reading it to go, well, Jesus is clearly more than a man because even the winds and the storms obey him. That's what manner of man is this? They were perplexed that he possessed an authority and a power that they had never seen, that even nature obeyed him. The point of this story is that Jesus is more than a man, that Jesus possesses the attributes of deity. He possesses the attributes of the creator who can control his own creation. There's 2 points of the story, faith and who Jesus is. That seems to be an exegetical conclusion of the text. That the text itself leads you to what they want you to see. And what most people do is focus on Jesus calming the storm. Jesus calming the storm. Hey, Jesus can calm the storm in your life. I think if we take the text and apply it using cross-references, that we can say God is sovereign and he's in control of every situation and may lead us into the situation. I think we can clearly teach that God is present with us. However, I think that we can teach that by trusting in God, by praying and giving everything over to prayer and supplication, this is Philippians 4, that we can experience the peace of God, which passeth all understanding. That God may not calm the storm, but he may bring peace inside of us. All right. I think that's a more applicable part. And then we can read from the text. And I think the text itself draws this point out. The question we must have is, do we trust God? Not to trust him to calm the storm, but to trust him, period. Whether he calms the storm or whether he leads us into an even greater storm, do we continue to trust him? I think that's the point of the text. It's easy to trust him if he calms the storm, but do you trust him when the storm continues to get worse and worse and worse? I think this is a story about trust and faith. And then very key to this story is a reminder to us that we're trusting in someone who was more than just a man. He was the one who had the power over creation. He had the power to calm a literal storm. This is reminding us of who Jesus is. I think that that's a better handling of the text. But so many sermons, I think, play loose with this. And I know it just screams the text. This is one of those texts that if you read, it just screams out, preach this. This is good for preaching, because you can take it and just go crazy with the allegory. You can create the story. It almost screams, take me and then you turn me into an allegory, an illustration. And we forget the literal historical account, and it just becomes like Play-Doh in our hands, and we create this wonderful story about your storms, you being tossed to and fro, you're about to drown, and then God stands up and says, peace be still to your storm. And then you leave church with hope that God is going to calm your storm. And I don't know if that's an accurate application of the text. So let me ask you again. I've kind of walked us through a defense of applying it a certain way. So what is the correct way to use this text, and what is the incorrect way? And I want you to, I want you to try to, and if you really will do this, I think it will be a good exercise. Write out your best justification for applying this text to the storms of life and using it in the way that I illustrated at the beginning. And then write out your best argument against doing it that way. And then write out what you think is a correct application of the text. I mean, first and foremost, it's simply describing a historical event. Is it prescribing something? I think there's some principles we can gain from it, but we got to ensure that we gain the right principles. All right, I'll stop right there. I just, to explain what happened is late last night, I was listening to BBN radio, and after, if you've listened to conservative plays hymns, and during the night, they do a little devotional segments, and there was a little devotional segment, and they were talking about are you facing the storms? Are you facing a storm in your life right now? Is your life in the midst of a storm? Well, trust in God, because Jesus says, peace be still, to calm the storms of your life. And it said something along those lines. And as I laid there, I was like, man, everyone handles that text that way. And so as soon as I was able to get to a microphone this morning, I thought I would at least go live and just kind of introduce this situation and then see how people respond to it and see what people think. I think it's just, again, so I listen to a lot of preaching. I don't know if you do. I listen to a lot of sermons. And and there's certain texts, it's just like there was a memo sent out to all pastors saying, preach the text this way. And there may be a variation and how they approach it. There may be a variation here or there, but there's almost like, here's the basic template, build on this, and here's the key points you want to make in your sermon. And the storms of life is a go-to type of sermon, and preachers have used it for a long time. And I think it should cause us all to stop and go, wait a minute, just because everyone uses the same template, is it possible that the template was wrong from the beginning? Maybe we need to throw out the template and go back to the text and allow the text to drive how we think about it, and to just stop looking at it based off these templates. I mean, we've heard the sermons so many times that literally they become a filter that we lay over the text, and we read into the story about Jesus calming the storm. We read into it the template that we've read and that we've heard preached a million times. We've got to rip that template off our eyes. We got to remove it from our Bible and look at the text and go, okay, what is this text really saying? I think the two major points are there at the end of the text in Mark. Hey, where's your faith? And hey, the disciples saying, what manner of man is this? Even the storms, even the winds, the waves, they obey him. That seems to be what where the text leads us. That's the conclusion. I don't think it's a guarantee of Jesus calming the storm. I don't think there's any guarantee of that. I mean, many of the disciples would find themselves in some horrible storms of life using that illustration that ultimately resulted in them dying, being crucified upside down, head being removed from their body. Yeah, the early church, they found themselves in all kinds of storms of persecution and were hunted down, killed, fed to the lions, burned at the stake. Their storms didn't stop. Now, the storms stop when they enter into heaven, but this is usually preached about God calming the storm right now in the here and now. And I don't think that text is guaranteeing that in any way, shape, or form. I think the principle can be, again, that God is sovereign. He can lead us into these difficult situations of life. He's in control of every situation of life. Jesus is with us. Okay, I think we can apply that. But I think the Bible promises a peace in the midst of difficulty, not necessarily a ending of the difficulty. I think that's more. And I think it's about our faith and about who Jesus is. I think we could do this. If you think about it, is the text really about us, or is the text really about who Jesus is? And once we realize that Jesus is not merely a man, then we should have a stronger faith. Is the text really about us and our storms, or is it about who Jesus is and why we should have a strong faith in him? Because he's more than just a man. Maybe that's how we should read the text. All right, I'll stop right there. Again, I hope when I started, I did not say 2019. There's nothing worse than when you start a live broadcast and within minutes you were like, this is not going well. But hey, that's one of the beauties of the live broadcast is there's no do-over. You're stuck. I guess when it's over, I could hit delete and be done with it. But I probably will post this. I think I will. I think there's a valuable exercise here if you will really engage yourself in the exercise. If you'll really take time to go, okay, how would I defend the normal use of this text? How would I argue against it? And how would I write out an application? You may like the way I've applied it. I mean, I'm kind of still thinking right now. My mind is still turning, going, what are some different ways we could handle this text? But I think the main lesson I want you to get from this is a reminder of just be careful of the template. When you listen to sermons, are you really studying the text, or are you just hearing the pastor give you the standard template and how everyone handles the text? Now, sometimes that template, the way everyone handles the text, is accurate and it's fine. Sometimes, though, I think it may actually be hindering our understanding of the actual text because we're not actually hearing the text. We're actually hearing the template. All right, if you have any questions, email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right, I'll stop right there. Maybe some more live broadcasts coming. We will see. All right. And, there's a lot more I want to say, but I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. God bless.